So if motivation is unreliable, how do we stay consistent? We have to shift from craving the high of achievement to embracing the process itself. James Clear, who studies habit formation, talks about the idea that we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. That means the secret to consistency isn't in trying harder, it's in setting up our lives so that showing up is easier than quitting. One of the most effective ways to do this is to shrink the size of the action until it feels impossible not to do it. Instead of saying, I'll work out for an hour, commit to 5 minutes. Instead of, I'll write a chapter, commit to a single paragraph. The reason this works isn't just about time, it's about how the brain responds to completion. Every time we follow through, even on a tiny action, we reinforce the identity of someone who shows up. There's a study that shows people who floss just one tooth a night are more likely to develop a full flossing habit than people who set the goal of flossing their whole mouth. Why? Because once we start, we usually keep going. The hardest part isn't the effort, it's overcoming the resistance to begin. And here's where it gets interesting. Over time, the brain starts to rewire itself. The actions that once felt hard become automatic. We stop relying on motivation because we've built a system that doesn't need it. I used to think consistency was about willpower. I thought the people who stuck with things just wanted it more. But what I've learned is that the most consistent people aren't necessarily the most motivated. They're the ones who build habits that work even on the days they don't feel like it. This is why long-term consistency isn't about being constantly inspired. It's about learning to show up even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when the results aren't immediate. Because the truth is, the most meaningful things in our lives don't happen in a single burst of inspiration. They happen in the quiet, unglamorous moments when no one is watching, when we choose again and again to stay in the process. Shame is the enemy of consistency. The moment we miss a day, we don't just feel disappointed, we feel like we are the disappointment. See, I knew I couldn't stick with it. That shame spiral, that's what takes us out of the game. We don't quit because we're lazy or unmotivated. We quit because of the story we tell ourselves when we fall short. And most of us, we tell some pretty brutal stories. It goes something like this. You start strong, you're showing up, you're making progress. Then life happens. You miss a workout. You skip writing for a few days. You break the streak. And suddenly, it's not just one missed day. It's evidence. See, I always do this. I can never stick with anything. Why did I even try? That's shame talking. Shame doesn't say you made a mistake. Shame says you are a mistake. And once that voice gets loud enough, it's so much easier to just stop trying. Because why would you keep going if you believe you're just going to fail again? This isn't just mindset stuff, it's science. You know that feeling when you start something with all the energy in the world, morning workouts, journaling, that new side project, and then a few weeks later, life happens. You hit snooze, skip a day, and suddenly the thing that felt so important is sitting in the corner collecting dust. Yeah, me too. Here's the truth. Consistency isn't about willpower. It's not about being more disciplined or just wanting it more. It's about something deeper. I've spent years researching what keeps people showing up, not just for their goals, but for their lives. And here's what I found. We're wired for short-term wins. Our brains love novelty, that first burst of motivation. It's like a sugar rush. But real change happens when we learn to crave the process, not just the results. Think about the last time you set a goal. Maybe it was starting a workout routine, writing every day, or even just drinking more water. In the beginning, it feels exciting. We're fueled by this energy that makes everything seem possible. We tell ourselves this time will be different. And for a little while, it is. Then something shifts. That first morning jog feels less like freedom and more like effort. The notebook that once felt like a portal to creativity now looks like work. That thing that felt so new suddenly feels ordinary. That's not failure, that's biology. Dopamine, the chemical that drives motivation, is all about anticipation. We get the biggest hit, not from doing the thing, but from thinking about doing it. Our brains are wired to seek rewards, and novelty gives us a fast, easy payout. The problem? That chemical rush fades fast. What's exciting on day 1 is routine by day 20. This is why we get trapped in cycles of excitement and burnout. We chase the high of starting something new, but when the novelty wears off, we assume we've lost our drive. We think, maybe I'm just not that disciplined. Maybe I don't want it badly enough. But that's not true. What's really happening is that our brains are doing exactly what they're designed to do, prioritizing short-term rewards over long-term change. But real consistency, it's messy. It's full of missed days, slow progress, and moments where you wonder if you're even moving forward at all. And the people who stick with it, they aren't the ones who never mess up. They're the ones who forgive themselves when they do. I used to think self-compassion was about making excuses, like if I let myself off the hook, I'd lose my drive. But what I've learned is that being kind to yourself isn't about lowering your standards. It's about removing the shame that keeps you stuck. Think about how you'd talk to a friend who was struggling. You wouldn't say, "Wow, you're such a failure. I can't believe you messed this up again." You'd probably say something like, "That was a rough day, but you're still in this." One step at a time. That's not weakness. That's what keeps people going. And here's the thing, when we talk about consistency, we focused way too much on not failing. But the real question isn't, will I fail? It's how will I respond when I do? Because you will miss days, you will get off track, life will throw you curveballs, and there will be times when your best effort just isn't enough. But if you can meet yourself in those moments with kindness instead of shame, you won't stay stuck. You'll get back up. And that, not perfection, is what consistency actually looks like. Identity beats goals. I want to run a marathon is a goal. I am a runner is an identity. When we shift from doing to being, we stop negotiating with ourselves every morning. Most of us set goals thinking they'll change us. We believe that once we hit the target, once we lose the weight, write the book, finish the course, then we'll become the kind of person we want to be. But that's not how real change works. It's not the finish line that transforms us, it's the process. And the people who stay consistent, they don't just set goals, they become the kind of person who shows up for them. There's a study that shows people who identify as voters are more likely to actually vote than people who just say, "I will vote." The difference? One is an action. The other is a part of who they are. It's subtle, but it matters. When you are something, you don't have to convince yourself to do it. A writer writes, a runner runs, a healthy person makes choices that align with their well-being. It's not about waking up and deciding whether you feel like it today. It's about who you are. In this shift, it changes everything. Most of us negotiate with ourselves way too much. We wake up and think, should I work out today? Do I have time? Do I feel like it? But when you see yourself as an athlete, as someone who moves their body because that's what they do, there's no debate. It's just a part of your identity. Think about it. If you tell yourself, I'm trying to exercise more, it feels optional. But if you say, I'm an active person, suddenly it's just what you do. The actions don't have to be perfect because they're not tied to a streak or an external goal. They're tied to you. And here's the kicker. You don't have to wait to earn this identity. You don't have to run a marathon to call yourself a runner. You don't have to publish a book to call yourself a writer. You just have to show up in a way that aligns with that identity. There's a story about Jerry Seinfeld, one of the most successful comedians of all time. Someone once asked him how he stayed consistent with writing jokes. His advice? Don't break the chain. He kept a calendar, and every day he wrote jokes. He put an X on the day. The goal wasn't to write the perfect joke. The goal was to be someone who writes every day. That's what identity-based consistency looks like. It's not about waiting for external validation. It's about making small choices over and over that reinforce who you already are. The people who stay in the game aren't the ones chasing some big transformation. They're the ones who decide, this is who I am now, and they live into it. Because when identity shifts, consistency stops feeling like effort. It just becomes the way you move through the world. Consistency isn't about going fast. It's about not stopping. The people who succeed, they don't wait for motivation. They build systems that work when motivation fades. We love the idea of momentum, that feeling of being on fire, making progress, crushing goals. It's intoxicating. And when we're in that place, it feels like we'll never stop. But then life happens. We get tired. We hit a rough patch. The excitement wears off. And suddenly, the thing that felt effortless yesterday feels impossible today. Research shows that when people feel shame, they don't course correct. They shut down. They withdraw. In one study, smokers who felt ashamed about their habit were actually less likely to quit. Not because they didn't want to, but because the shame made them feel powerless. When we feel like we are the problem, we don't change. We hide. But here's what's wild. The people who are most consistent aren't the ones who never miss a day. They're the ones who recover quickly when they do. Think about it. If you trip on one step, you don't throw yourself down the whole staircase. But that's exactly what we do with our habits. We stumble, and instead of standing back up, we spiral. The difference between people who stay consistent and people who don't isn't perfection. It's how they talk to themselves when they fail. Self-compassion isn't a soft skill, it's a survival strategy. Dr. Kristin Neff, who researches self-compassion, found that people who treat themselves with kindness when they make mistakes are actually more likely to stay motivated. Why? Because when we stop making failure mean something about our worth, we can actually learn from it instead of being paralyzed by it. One of the most powerful things we can do when we slip up is to change the story we tell ourselves. Instead of, I always do this, I'll never change, try, that was a hard day, tomorrow is a fresh start. Instead of, I messed up, what's the point? Try, that didn't go as planned, but I'm still in this. And I know it sounds simple, but these small shifts are the difference between someone who stays in the process and someone who gives up. Because when we believe one bad day defines us, we stop showing up. But when we believe that setbacks are part of the process, we keep going. So the next time you miss a day or a week or even a month, pay attention to the voice that shows up. If it sounds like shame, don't let it drive the car. A single misstep doesn't erase the progress you've made. It doesn't define who you are. What does? The choice to begin again. The most consistent people aren't the ones with perfect habits. They're the ones who are kind to themselves when they fall off track. Self-compassion isn't a soft skill. It's a survival strategy. We love the idea that consistency is about discipline, about pushing through no matter what. And sure, grit matters, but what actually keeps people in the game isn't how hard they can push, it's how well they can recover. Here's where most of us get it wrong. We think being hard on ourselves will make us better. We miss a day, slip up on a goal, or make a mistake, and we go straight to criticism. You should have tried harder, you always do this, you'll never be consistent. And we think this kind of self-talk will motivate us. Like if we just beat ourselves up enough, we'll finally get it right. But the research, it says the opposite. Dr. Kristin Neff's work on self-compassion found that people who are kind to themselves after a setback are more likely to get back on track, not less. Self-criticism, on the other hand, doesn't make us more disciplined. It makes us more afraid to try again. Because if every mistake leads to self-punishment, why would we keep showing up? This is why perfectionism is such a trap. It tells us if I don't do this perfectly, it doesn't count. It convinces us that if we can't follow through exactly as planned, we've failed. And so the moment we break a streak or miss a day, we assume the whole thing is ruined. Might as well quit now. And that's the moment that makes or breaks consistency. Because consistency isn't about how fast you can go when you're motivated. It's about what you do when you don't feel like showing up, when you're busy, when you're uninspired, when no one is watching. That's when systems matter more than motivation. Motivation is a wave. It comes and goes. It's easy to start something when you're riding that high, but discipline, structure, systems, those are the things that keep you moving when motivation disappears. James Clear, who studies habits, talks about the idea that the best way to stay consistent isn't to rely on willpower, it's to reduce friction. Make it easier to do the thing you say you want to do. If you want to read more, put a book on your pillow so it's the last thing you see at night. If you want to work out in the morning, set your shoes next to your bed so there's no excuse. Small tweaks in your environment make a huge difference. But it's not just about making things easier, it's about making peace with slow progress. Most of us want results fast. We want to see the change, feel the impact, know that what we're doing is working. And when we don't, we get frustrated. We think, why isn't this happening faster? But real change, deep, lasting change, never happens overnight. It happens through small, consistent actions that at first don't seem to be doing much at all. And that's where most people give up. Not because they're incapable, but because they don't trust the process when they can't see immediate results. There's a story about bamboo that I love. When you plant bamboo, nothing happens for the first few years. You water it, you take care of it. But above the surface, nothing. Then suddenly, in year 5, it explodes upwards, sometimes growing almost 3 feet in a single day. But here's the thing, that growth didn't happen overnight. For years, the roots were growing underground, laying the foundation for what was coming. That's what consistency looks like. It's showing up even when you don't see progress. It's trusting that every action, no matter how small, is building something. And when you really get that, when you stop obsessing over speed and start focusing on not stopping, everything shifts. Because the truth is, most people don't fail. They just stop too soon. The people who make it, they're the ones who find a way to keep moving forward, even if it's just an inch at a time. Because forward is forward. And consistency isn't about winning every day, it's about staying in the game. Consistency isn't about perfection. It's not about streaks or willpower or waiting for the right moment. It's about showing up, even when it's messy, even when you don't feel like it, even when progress feels invisible. It's about the story you tell yourself when you fall short, the identity you choose to step into, the systems you build to keep going when motivation fades. And most of all, it's about not stopping, because the people who succeed aren't always the most talented, the most disciplined, or the most motivated. They're the ones who refuse to quit. So if you're struggling to stay consistent, ask yourself, what's one small action I can take today, not tomorrow, not next week, today? Because the only way to build consistency is to start where you are with what you have right now. Good luck, you've got this. And I want to hear from you. What's one habit you're trying to stay consistent with, and what's the biggest challenge you face in sticking with it? Thank you for being here, for showing up, for doing the hard work. I appreciate you.